Hello witches, it's Calden. I hope you're all doing well. So today I wanted to make a video about the Witch's Compass. This is something I've made a video about before in the past, so I'll put a link down below for that. But I kind of wanted to do an updated video on it, as well as one focusing a little bit more on Robert Cochrane. For those of you who don't know, Robert Cochrane is a famous traditional witch from the 1960s who was the founder of the Clan of Tubal Cain, and is the person we can largely credit for concepts such as the Witch's Compass. One of the things I get asked a lot in regards to the compass is how it differs from ritual circles used by Wiccans or other magical practitioners. And I'd like to answer this question by first starting with a quote from Doreen Valiente. She says that the magic circle is part of the general heritage of magical practice, which is worldwide and of incalculable age. Magic circles have varied from the elaborate spiritual fortress of divine names, which may be used by the ceremonial magician, to the simple round drawn by the witch. That quote comes from her ABCs of Witchcraft. What I like about this quote is that it points to the fact that magic circles have been around for a really long time and used by many different people. So how they're going to differ is largely in how it's constructed and the purpose behind it. But even with that, you are bound to find similarities. So one thing I think of in terms of, similarities is that traditional witches and Wiccans draw from very similar sources. And I've talked about that before in the past too. When Gerald Gardner was establishing Wicca, he was pulling from sources like ceremonial magic, as well as, sources perhaps like the cunning folk. And that is also areas too where traditional witches have drawn from. So there's similarities. And that's totally fine. I think sometimes people get hung up in trying to find differences in order to suggest that one is better than the other or more authentic or something like that. And I don't think either one is better than the other or more authentic or whatnot. So anyways, sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. So how it's going to differ is in construction and intention. So hopefully some of this will make a little bit more sense as we go along, but I also think that one of the easiest ways to figure out similarities and differences for yourself is to experience them. If you've ever cast a circle in a Wiccan sense and then laid a compass, you will experience them directly, and you'll find similarities and differences, especially thinking about in terms of how you feel. So anyways, that's my 2 cents on how they differ. So hopefully that satisfies people, but I think it's something that you need to figure out yourself. So anyways, okay, focusing and getting into it. The sources that I'm pulling from for this video come from the Robert Cochrane letters. So Robert Cochrane never wrote any books, but he did write a series of letters to different magical practitioners. And the letters were published in book format, as well as online. So if you just search Robert Cochrane letters on Google, you can find them. The letters that I'm focusing on in this video come from ones that he wrote to ceremonial magician Bill Gray, as well as articles written by Evan John Jones, who was an associate of Cochrane's. So in one of the letters he wrote to Bill Gray, Cochrane described the compass as a highly efficient and scientific machine. My first thoughts about this quote is that it sounds super unromantic, thinking about the compass as a machine. It sounds, science fiction-esque, but it makes sense when you think about it, because when we are laying a compass, we are pulling from different sources of power, such as the elements, from celestial influences as well. And also when we think of the term compass, it's another word for circle, but it also describes the navigational device that we hopefully are all familiar with, that is useful in traveling. And that's kind of the big intention behind laying a compass, is creating a liminal space wherein you travel through realms for various purposes, such as communing with the gods or working magic. So in a sense, laying a compass is a science. In his tradition, how the compass is created is 3 concentric rings around a fixed point. And each of these rings represent a different concept. So the first ring represents life, and it's created using salt, which of course is something that is necessary for life. We need it to survive, and also when we think of salt, it's also a preservative. It keeps things alive, in a sense. I'm thinking specifically about like preserving food and keeping food fresh. So how you go about this is you lay the salt around you, versus, laying it and then crossing into it. You're laying it around you. And this process, laying a compass is described as a pretty silent ritual. There's not a lot of spoken word, which is kind of true for a lot of Robert Cochrane's tradition, is that it's not based on scripted ritual. It's based on things that are spontaneous, from the heart, and kind of created in the moment. So if there are words spoken, it's pretty simple, to the point, and from the witch's heart. So you lay the salt, you have crossed the boundary of life. You take a step back, and you lay the second circle around you. And this circle represents death. It is made of ash from birch and willow. The willow represents mourning, as in like mourning death, not like mourning the time period. And the birch represents rebirth that comes after death. You take a step back, and you lay the third and final ring, and this represents the Lethe River, or the river that we cross over into the other world. And it is made out of 4 ingredients. The first is water, which represents the river itself, as well as time. The wine represents the earthly pleasures that we're leaving behind, the good things in life. And salt and vinegar. These represent the sad things we're leaving behind, the disappointment, and the hurt that we've experienced in life. We're leaving all of this behind, and we're taking a step back into the other world. We are now in the center of the compass, which is described as the castle. And Cochrane connects this to the Welsh goddess Arianrhod. I don't know if I'm saying her name correctly. I was trying to learn how to pronounce it before making this, so I apologize. But her castle, I was reading about it, and it was said that it's another term for the other world in Celtic Welsh mythology. I don't know how true that is, but I thought it was really interesting, connecting to the fact that now in the compass we're crossing over into the other world. And her castle is also connected with the Corona Borealis and the Pole Star, which are connected in turn with the Axis Mundi, which is the central point in the compass. It is the place where the 4 directions, the 4 winds, the 4 elements converge, and magic happens. So the castle is seen as four-walled, and each wall is the realm of one of the four elements, or winds. And each direction is related to a king. So in the north, which is associated with air, is Tetons. His name is Tetons. And he is the Lord of the Mound. He is the god of the dead, and he is symbolized by the setting sun. And then you go to the east, you have got Lucet, who, this is fire, Lucet, who is the Lord of the Morning Star. He is the horned child, and he is represented by the rising sun. Then in the south, which is Earth, you've got Kernos, who is the Lord of the animals, the god of the woodlands. And then in the west, you've got Node, who is water, the Lord of the sea. He's associated with things like rest, sleep, death, and the other worlds. Really, Cochrane relates him to King Arthur and the hero who is asleep in Avalon, or the other world. So once you're in the center, you may have 4 lanterns representing, the directions and the kings, and you'll light them. So this is coming from Ivan John Jones, and he described lighting the lanterns, and again, similar to when you're laying down the rings, saying simple words. But you start in the north, and then you go to south, and then east, and then west. And effectively, you're calling in those influences. Once you've done that, you are good to go with whatever magic you are looking to do, whether that is communing with the gods, doing spells, rituals, hedge crossing, traversing the realms, whatever. And I should mention that, sometimes the fixed point in the center of the compass is a fire. Sometimes it's the stang itself. And this is something that can be used to tread the mill. So when you tread the mill, you're focusing on a fixed point. So having that in the center, whatever your fixed point is in the center. Anyways, when you're done, you cross back out. You don't necessarily deconstruct the space like you would perhaps in a Wiccan circle, where you are, saying goodbye to the elements. What you're going to do is you are going to walk out. So you are crossing out of the other world, you are crossing the line of death and rebirth, and you are crossing back into life. Effectively, what is happening is you are being reborn. Just like when you're crossing into the compass, you are effectively dying. You are crossing over. So, that's just a little bit about the compass. I don't necessarily do that ritual. When I do it, I think that there's many different ways, of course, but this is, I guess, the traditional way of doing it in terms of Robert Cochrane's tradition. I have done it like this before, and it was a really, really powerful and interesting experience. So it's definitely something that I would recommend, trying at some point. Thinking about it is something that I would like to do again. I did it this last summer with a group of people, and there was something really awesome about doing something that is in a specific format, relating to a specific tradition. So Anyways, now I'm just rambling. So I hope that was helpful and interesting. I certainly think it's really interesting. It's one of the concepts within traditional witchcraft that I really like exploring and talking about. So if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. I'll put a link, like I said, I'll put a link down below to my previous video I made about this, which I feel like was a while ago, as well as an article that I wrote over at Pathos about the Witch's Compass. So, yeah. Okay. Well, I hope you're all doing well, and until next time, take care.